Friedrich had known this man for 15 years. Their children used to play together in the park. Their wives exchanged recipes. But today, when his neighbor nodded to him in the breadline, Friedrich could not meet his eyes. He didn't feel hatred toward him. He felt shame. In Friedrich's pocket lay a leaflet. Someone had pushed it into his hand that morning on a street corner. It said that Germany was dying because of the Jews, that they were the cause of every misfortune. And for the first time in 15 years of knowing him, Friedrich looked at Rosenthal and caught himself in a thought he could not bear. This is Berlin, January 1933. Friedrich is 42. The last 10 years of his life have been a slow fall into the abyss. Inflation burned through his savings. The crisis shut down his business. 3 years at the unemployment office burned what was left of his pride. Friedrich is not a cruel man. He is simply, absolutely, mortally tired. And when he reads the promise, "I will come and fix everything, just trust me," his hands stop trembling for the first time in years. In that moment, Friedrich makes a choice, not in favor of hatred, in favor of relief. This is not a story about politics. This is a story about how exhaustion breaks morality. Why, in times of chaos, do we so desperately reach for a strong hand? And why could this happen to any of us? Today, we're going to unpack the psychology of collective despair. Imagine you're walking across a bridge, and suddenly the railings turn to fog. You don't know where to step. That's what a crisis does to the mind. There were 6 million Friedrichs in 1933. 6 million unemployed in a country that only a decade earlier had a confident middle class. By this point, the Weimar Republic had existed for 14 years. In those 14 years, more than 20 governments had come and gone. More than 20. Parliament had become a brawl, communists and Nazis literally fighting inside the chamber. In Berlin, there were neighborhoods where the police simply refused to go. Money lost value so fast that wages were paid twice a day, so a man could buy bread before the price went up. Cafe menus were rewritten every hour. A grandmother who had saved her whole life for retirement would wake up one day and find her savings could buy a single postage stamp. And in this mess, chaos, poverty, fear, constant street violence, the German voter in 1933 made his choice. Not because he believed in racial theory, most never read it, but because he was tired, because he wanted it to end at any cost. And here is the important part. Germany is not an exception. This is a pattern that keeps repeating. Italy after the First World War. Millions of unemployed veterans, strikes, shootings in the streets. Mussolini arrives, and he is greeted as a savior. Spain in the 30s, civil war, total collapse. Franco arrives. Russia in the 90s, disintegration, gang violence, empty shelves, and society is ready, gratefully, to accept a strong hand. The pattern isn't in ideology, not in culture, not in national character. The pattern is in the temperature. When a society overheats, when old structures crack, when tomorrow is unpredictable, when you no longer know who to trust, people stop wanting debate. They want silence. They want someone else to carry the weight of choice. And here is where it gets interesting, because this is no longer about politics. This is about how our brain is wired. There's a theory in psychology called terror management theory. It was developed by three Americans, Solomon, Greenberg, and Pazinski, in the late 80s. They asked a simple question. What happens to a person when you remind them of their own mortality? The experiments were elementary. One group was asked to think about their own death. Another was asked to think about something neutral, a toothache, for example. Then both groups were asked to evaluate politicians, worldviews, and different groups of us and them. The result repeated itself again and again across dozens of countries, across thousands of people. Those who were reminded of death chose harsher, more authoritarian, more self-confident leaders. They clung harder to their own group. They were harsher toward outsiders. And the difference wasn't measured in percentage points, it was measured in multiples. This isn't about politics, it's about physiology. When a person senses a threat, any threat, the amygdala activates. That's the part of the brain responsible for the fight or flight response. At the same time, activity in the prefrontal cortex drops, the part responsible for complex thinking, for nuance, for on one hand, on the other hand. Put simply, under stress, we get dumber. Not because we're stupid, because that's how survival works. On the savannah, when a lion is chasing you, you don't need to weigh 30 options. You need to run. Complicated questions can be discussed later, if there is a later. And here emerges a paradox that the German philosopher Erich Fromm described back in the 40s. Freedom is heavy. Choice is heavy. Thinking for yourself is heavy. When things are calm, we can handle it. When things go bad, we want one thing: for someone to take this weight off our shoulders. Fromm called it escape from freedom. We don't give it up because we're forced to. We hand it over ourselves, quietly, with relief. Like a man who finally takes off a backpack he has been carrying too long. There's another mechanism. It was identified by the British social psychologist Michael Hogg. He called it uncertainty identity theory. The idea is simple. When a person doesn't know who they are, where they are, or what tomorrow will bring, it becomes unbearable. The brain physically cannot stand uncertainty. And so a person starts looking for a group with clear rules, with a sharp line between us and them, with a strong leader who will say what is good and what is evil. And here is Hogg's key finding. The stronger the uncertainty, the harsher the group we choose. In calm times, we are willing to live in soft, open, diverse communities. In a crisis, we need walls, borders, and a chief. And here is a nuance that is almost never mentioned. A strong leader in a crisis isn't necessarily smarter, not necessarily more competent. Research shows the opposite. Under stress, people don't choose the competent, they choose the confident. Not the one who says, "I'll try, but I can't guarantee." The one who says, "I know what to do." We are willing to forgive a strong leader his lies. We will never forgive him his doubt, because his certainty is our only shield against the abyss. Certainty becomes more important than truth, because the truth in a crisis is usually, "I don't know what's coming." And "I don't know" is the one thing an exhausted mind cannot bear to hear. This is how the whole picture comes together. Fear reduces thinking. Reduced thinking seeks simplicity. Simplicity seeks a group. The group seeks a leader. The leader sells certainty, and certainty beats truth. This is not a conspiracy. This is not the stupidity of the masses. This is not the dark ages. This is how we are built, and it does not change. Look at El Salvador today. For decades, this country lived in a nightmare. The murder rate was so high that people were afraid to step outside. Mothers didn't know if their child would come back from school. Shop owners paid protection money to gangs or disappeared. Total, absolute uncertainty in every single day. And then comes Nayib Bukele, young, in a leather jacket, smiling. He calls himself, literally, publicly, the world's coolest dictator. He declares a state of emergency. He suspends constitutional rights. He throws tens of thousands of people into prison without trial, without distinction, on suspicion alone. Western human rights activists are horrified. Now go out on the streets of San Salvador and ask a woman selling vegetables in the market, let's call her Maria, and she will tell you a sentence that will make you want to cry. I don't care what they say about separation of powers. For the first time in 20 years, I can work without paying the gangs. And my son is alive. Maria's approval rating for Bukele is above 80%, like half the country. This is not Berlin 1933. This is not marches. This is not concentration camps. This is an ordinary woman making an ordinary, understandable, human choice. And the mechanism is exactly the same. It works at every level. A company in crisis calls for a strong CEO who promises to fix everything in 100 days. A family in a divorce looks for a therapist who knows exactly what needs to be done. A country in recession votes for the one who speaks the loudest. None of these situations make us bad people. They make us tired people. And here comes the turn. All this time we believed the problem was strong leaders, that they were the cause, that if Hitler had never risen, everything would have been different. If this one specific man had not come to power, there would have been no tragedy. But that is not true. The problem was not Hitler. The problem was that 6 million Friedrichs could no longer live with uncertainty. Hitler was not the cause. Hitler was the symptom. Strong leaders don't create movements. Exhausted minds do. We don't love strong leaders. We use them as a painkiller for our own freedom. And this flips the entire question. We always ask, why do they come to power? But the right question sounds different. Why do we, at a certain moment, so desperately want them to come? Freedom is not something that is taken from us. Freedom is something we hand over when we become too tired to carry it. And in every age of fear, someone will step forward and say, "Only I know how to fix this." The question is not whether he is telling the truth. The question is why, for one short second, we so desperately want to believe him.